Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Delegations from Russia and the United States are currently meeting in Saudi Arabia with the hopes of pushing forward peace negotiations. This comes after the US and Ukraine held talks separately last night, which were described as productive. Tens of thousands of protesters have taken part in fierce demonstrations across Turkey after Istanbul Mayor Imamoglu is imprisoned. Protesters are shot with rubber bullets, hit with tear gas and physically clash with riot police. The United States pounds the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, killing 1 and injuring 9. The Iran-backed Houthi military group vow to retaliate. South Korea's Constitutional Court reinstates Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's powers after his impeachment as acting president nearly 3 months ago. The court ruled 5-1 to strike down Han's impeachment, where he stood accused of not opposing Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration. Thailand's opposition grills Prime Minister Phay Tong-tan on the first day of a parliamentary no-confidence motion. The opposition accuses her of being unqualified and allowing her father to wield influence over her administration. Wildfires continue in the South Korean northeast, where firefighters can battle to contain the blaze. The fires continue to displace hundreds of people and kill at least 4. Pakistan's army kills 16 armed fighters along the country's western border with Afghanistan. Tensions have risen between the two countries in recent times, with the Pakistan government constantly asking Afghanistan to ensure effective border management. Israel's cabinet passed a vote of no confidence in its Attorney General days after the state's highest court blocked the cabinet's dismissal of its internal security head. The Attorney General had openly cautioned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against trying to replace the Shin Bet chief. Israel's cabinet has passed a no-confidence motion against the Attorney General, a significant move against a vocal critic of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This move has sparked protests in the country. This comes just days after the Israeli government fired the head of the country's internal security agency, a decision later blocked by Israel's Supreme Court. In a separate development, Netanyahu has accused the head of Shin Bet, Israel's internal security agency, of investigating far-right minister Itamar Ben-Gvir without his consent. The Prime Minister denied claims that Shin Bet chief Ronan Bar had been authorised to gather evidence against political leaders, calling the allegations a lie. Meanwhile, the EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, held a press conference in Cairo, where she urged to end the renewed fighting in Gaza. She stressed that the killing must stop and called for both sides to resume negotiations. The EU also called for Israel to reinstate humanitarian aid to Gaza and for Hamas to release all hostages. The Israeli military has continued ground operations in Gaza, moving forward with a deadly offensive in the region as ceasefire talks failed. We are now joined by Joshua Barnes, correspondent and anchor for NewsX World, to discuss this further. Thank you very much for joining us, Joshua. There have been protests across the entire state of Israel, partly because of this no confidence vote, partly because of other factors. Joshua, what is the significance in this no confidence vote specifically?
Well, this confidence vote, of course, has several ramifications. We're looking first at Benjamin Netanyahu basically going against what the Supreme Court has ruled. Of course, in his eyes, the position of Ronan Bar is now untenable. The court have blocked it. Before this no confidence motion, there were, of course, comments from Benjamin Netanyahu saying that this would be followed through anyway and that Ronan Bar would no longer be in charge of Shin Bet. But it seems that that will not need to be the case. This no confidence motion has gone through and no confidence has been voted upon. Serious ramifications for the Supreme Court. But in my opinion, this is Benjamin Netanyahu flexing his muscles when he's in a difficult point. There is, of course, discontent in Israel. There's a divided government. Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't control a large majority, so there is a lot of opposition who dispute some of the things he's done related to this motion, related to Ronan Bar, but also related to the ongoing conflict in Gaza, with hostages, of course, being still held by Hamas and a renewed effort to fight on the front line in Gaza.
Joshua, this isn't the first time protests have happened throughout Israel. They've been ongoing for a while. Why are the Israeli people some of the Israeli people so dissatisfied with the Netanyahu administration?
Well, yes, as I mentioned, the country is definitely divided over key topics. I mean, the offensive in Gaza is the first one that has caused a clear divide. Many people saying that no ceasefire should have been sort of agreed upon and that fighting should have resumed, and that was the only way to get their key aims, which is what they want. They want the hostages to be returned, dead and alive, all of them. They want Hamas out of Gaza, and they want to make sure that there's no further attacks coming from Gaza or elsewhere, like we saw on October the 7th, 2023. So that in its own is divisive, because there are a large group of people who believe the hostages should be returned no matter what, and whether that's through fighting, whether that's through peace and diplomacy. So there's a deep divide there, but also politically there is a deep divide. There is a clear divide amongst the people who support Netanyahu and don't, whether that's related to Gaza or not. He faces a lot of difficulties in the parliament over the coming days and weeks, again looking at this instance with Ronan Bar.
Joshua, thank you very much. You are staying. Yemen's Houthi rebels say a US airstrike on the capital Sana'a has killed 1 person and injured 13 others, including 3 children. The rebels blame Washington for what they call an act of aggression targeting a residential building. Here is what an eyewitness said.
العدوى الإسرائيلي الأمريكي باستهداف مكان مدني خالي من السكان بدون عدو قدر الإنشاء، ومما أثار 4 جرحى كانوا ماشي تقطعوا، تم إسعافهم نشلوا من هنا يطلعونهم، وحصل أولي ذا الحين عن 5 جرحى في مستشفى ابن سينا تم إسعافهم، 13 جريح.
The United States has not confirmed the specific strike, but says its military is conducting daily operations against Iran-backed Houthi targets. This comes as part of a renewed US offensive aimed at stopping Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping routes. Earlier this month, the rebels warned of renewed strikes on maritime trade, citing Israel's blockade of Gaza. They have also claimed responsibility for attacks targeting Israel, vowing to escalate further. We move over to Turkey now, where in some latest news, Istanbul's embattled Ekrem İmamoğlu has now officially been nominated as a presidential candidate by the opposition CHP party for the 2028 elections. Meanwhile, tensions continue to rise in Turkey as authorities detain 9 journalists. They were covering protests against the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. The opposition leader, seen as President Erdogan's main political rival, was jailed on corruption charges, sparking the country's largest demonstrations in over a decade. Despite bans on street gatherings, protests have continued for 5 consecutive nights, with İmamoğlu calling the charges unimaginable slander. His wife, addressing a massive crowd outside City Hall, vowed the government would pay a political price for targeting her husband. Here is what she said.
Ekrem'i tutukladılar. Bu haksız, hukuksuz kararı milyonlarca insan vicdanında neye karşılık geldiğinin farkında değiller. Ama öğrenecekler. Göz göre göre haksızlığa, adaletsizliğe uğramanın çok derin bir acısı vardır.
Meanwhile, reports suggest that social media platform X has restricted opposition accounts in Turkey, raising concerns over free speech. And in a symbolic primary vote, 15 million people cast ballots in support of İmamoğlu. Here's what the president of the opposition party, CHP, had to say.
Bu Türkiye siyasi tarihi kadar dünya siyasi tarihi açısından da inanılmaz önemli bir halk hareketidir. Ekrem İmamoğlu şu anda cezaevi yolundadır. Ama bir yandan da Cumhurbaşkanlığı yolundadır. Onu Silivri'ye doğru ittirenlere inat, millet onu Çankaya Köşkü'ne yakınlaştırmaktadır.
Moving on now, in a major political twist in South Korea, the Constitutional Court has ruled against the impeachment of the country's Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. He is now positioned as the acting president of South Korea. Han took over as the acting president after the country's leader Yoon Suk-yeol was himself impeached over his short declaration of martial law last year. Han lasted less than 2 weeks in the post and was impeached and suspended on the 27th of December after clashing with the opposition-led parliament. The court's justice ruled 7-1 to strike down the impeachment. During the ruling, 5 justices said the impeachment motion against Han was valid, but there was not enough grounds to impeach him. Let's in fact listen to what the court had to say.
국무회의 소집을 건의하지 않았다는 등의 소추 관련 사실을 인정할 만한 증거나 객관적
After being reinstated as the acting president, Han Duck-soo said he would expend all effort to safeguarding the country's national interest amid a global trade war. Listen in.
존경하는 국민 여러분, 오늘 오전 헌법재판소가 내린 결정에 따라 막 직무에 복귀하였습니다.
Meanwhile, here's how the people of South Korea are reacting to the news.
기각된 것이 잘 됐다고 생각해요. 난 그 소리 듣고선 방송 듣고 방송 보면서 박수 쳤어요.
법과 상식에 비춰봤을 때 조금 납득이 되지 않는 부분도 있었는데 그런데 이 혼란스러운 정국이 일단 해결이 되는 게 급선무니까 어떻게든 잘 해결이 됐으면 하는 바람입니다.
We are joined by Joshua Barnes, anchor and correspondent for NewsX World, once again to discuss this topic further. Joshua, I was wondering if you could explain to me why Han Duck-soo was impeached and why this U-turn in South Korean politics is so significant.
Yes, well, the impeachment of Han Duck-soo was, of course, a shock, but it came off the back of the decision that he made, of course, put in post after Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment, but it didn't last more than a couple of weeks. So the opposition party were looking to put in some new constitutional court judges, and their opinion was that this would make it easier for the impeachment and the following impeachment that would have been enacted for Yoon Suk-yeol. But Han Duck-soo decided to block this and then bringing the impeachment motion from the opposition party. Now this ruling, of course, we've seen 5 constitutional court judges vote against it, 1 for it and 2 decided to abstain. But this seriously does send a message now to the politics of South Korea that it's not just a sort of impeachment and here we go. It really is a statement from them, and we will be looking, of course, at what the impacts are on Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment. Now that itself is not directly related to this, but we have seen, of course, a ruling from the Constitutional Court, and there will be one to come imminently on Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment, and that, of course, will have devastating impacts. It will mean he's immediately taken out of post. There will need to be a re-election and a new election within 60 days following that impeachment vote. And of course, we can't forget Yoon Suk-yeol's criminal investigation and criminal trial that is also ongoing. So a real moment of instability in South Korean politics.
Joshua, this has been an ongoing situation since Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law on that December day for 6 hours. What can you tell me about this? What more can you tell me about this situation going on in South Korea?
Well, absolutely. The political instability, of course, is harming politics in South Korea. There are also wider impacts as a result. South Korea in East Asia is a pivotal nation allied with the US as well. And although we have been seeing conversations ongoing, like the recent one between Japan, South Korea and China held in Tokyo, this of course is ongoing in the background. The uncertainty that I mentioned over Yoon Suk-yeol is of course there. I mean, if South Korea needs to go back to the polls and Yoon Suk-yeol is impeached, it will create more political chaos and more divide, and that's something we've seen throughout. There are staunch Yoon supporters. We saw, of course, when he was arrested, there was almost a human barricade, a human wall around his presidential compound, not just guards, but also supporters. And throughout his court cases, until this position where we're in, there have been staunch support for Yoon Suk-yeol. Of course, protesters as well, the opposition party, and also people who support the move to impeach Yoon Suk-yeol. But the situation in Korea is chaotic, to say the least, but we should be expecting a verdict on his impeachment trial soon, and then the ongoing criminal case, which is one that we of course will be keeping an eye on. The implications for Yoon in that, he could be facing life imprisonment or the death penalty. Serious one for us to keep an eye on.
Joshua Barnes, thank you very much for joining us. We move on now. At least 4 people have been killed and 6 have been injured in a series of wildfires in South Korea. Firefighters have rushed to extinguish the flames. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety said that it had declared a state of disaster in the country's southern regions to facilitate mobilization of resources to contain the fires. More than 9,000 staff and 105 helicopters have been deployed to quell the fires engulfing areas, mostly in the southeast of the country. As per the then acting president, Choi Sang-mok, more than 1,000 residents took shelter as the fires wiped out some 6,300 hectares of forests. As per the then acting president, Choi Sang-mok, more than 1,005 residents took shelter. Following China's development forum in Beijing, attended by CEOs from big foreign firms, several US giants have expressed their incline towards China's clean energy initiative. Apple Incorporated said it will set up a new clean energy fund in China worth 720 million yuan or 99 million US dollars, coinciding with a Beijing visit of its CEO, Tim Cook. Apple said in a statement that it is a move aimed at expanding its clean energy capacity in China and is part of the country's efforts to transition its supply chain to 100% renewable energy by 2030. Furthermore, Laos has signed a $1.45 billion clean energy deal with a Chinese power plant equipment manufacturer. This can prove to be a huge step as the Southeast Asian country furthers its push into clean power generation and transmission. China's Western Power Industrial, along with a Singapore-based construction company, signed the agreement with Seakong Thermal Power Plant in Laos. This agreement included aid to design, supply and build a 1,800 megawatt clean energy power project in southern Laos, according to a stock exchange filing by the Shaoshan-based company. Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra faces a no-confidence vote in Parliament starting on Monday, with the opposition targeting her on the country's struggling economy and alleged influence from her powerful father, former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. Despite criticism, Paetongtarn enters the debate with strong parliamentary support, marking it unlikely the motion will succeed when voted on Wednesday. The opposition People's Party accuses Paetongtarn of being controlled by Thaksin, a divisive figure banned from holding office due to corruption charges. Thaksin, who returned to Thailand in 2023, has openly influenced policies such as legalizing gambling and adopting cryptocurrency. Paetongtarn has denied her government is under anyone's control, while Thaksin claims to be retired and only offers advice. The government's economic measures have failed to stimulate sufficient growth, with household debt and structural issues hindering progress. Critics argue the focus on Thaksin diverts attention from pressing national issues like the economy and security. To South Asia now, where tensions are rising along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Pakistan's military says it has killed 16 fighters in North Khuzestan. The army claims the fighters attempted to infiltrate from Afghanistan. Pakistan has urged Kabul to secure its side of the border. This comes as Pakistan's envoy is in Kabul for talks. Islamabad accuses Afghanistan's Taliban rulers of sheltering the Pakistan Taliban. The armed group known as the TTP has carried out deadly attacks in Pakistan. Over 1,500 people have died in such violence this year alone. Pakistan has launched multiple raids targeting militants, but Kabul denies supporting the TTP. The border remains a flashpoint as tensions between the two countries escalate. The United States is reaffirming its commitment to strong trade ties with India. Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for South and Central Asia, Brendan Lynch, along with a team of officials, will visit India from March the 25th to the 29th for bilateral trade discussions. According to a statement from the U.S. Embassy, the visit aims to advance a productive and balanced trade relationship. Officials say they value ongoing engagement with the Indian government on trade and investment matters and look forward to constructive and forward-looking discussions. Key areas of focus are expected to include market access, supply chain resilience, and digital trade. The visit comes as both nations work to deepen economic cooperation amid evolving global trade dynamics. Recent discussions have also touched on investment opportunities and regulatory frameworks. Officials emphasize that these engagements reflect the growing strategic partnership between the US and India. The first US deportation flight to Venezuela since March the 8th has landed near Caracas, carrying 199 Venezuelan nationals, including alleged members of the Tren de Agua gang. The flights resumed after an agreement between the US and Venezuela, following a temporary suspension ordered by President Nicolas Maduro in response to US sanctions on Venezuelan oil exports. Video from the arrival shows some deportees celebrating, while others made the sign of the cross as they stepped off the plane under heavy security. The US State Department confirmed that deportation flights would continue, with the latest transfer passing through Honduras before reaching Venezuela. Maduro, who ratified the measure, accused El Salvador's president of kidnapping Venezuelans previously deported there and demanded their release. Venezuelan officials insist the flights will ensure migrants return with their human rights protected, while the US authorities say deportations will proceed as part of their immigration enforcement strategy. When asked about a report whether former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte required asylum from China before being arrested by the ICC, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiaqin responded by saying that Duterte's visit to Hong Kong was just a private vacation. He also stated that the Chinese government never received any asylum request from Duterte or his family. A Philippine media report from GMA News Online had claimed that China had rejected Duterte's asylum request. It also reported that the Philippine police wanted to arrest Duterte in Hong Kong. But the Hong Kong police refused to cooperate with Interpol since China is not a member of the Rome Statute. Guo rejected these claims, saying that they were made by individuals with ulterior motives, and advised the media to be careful and not to believe such fabricated stories. Let's take a listen to what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson had to say.
我愿特别指出，杜特尔特先生赴香港系私人度假行程。中方从未收到所谓杜特尔特前总统及其家人向中国政府寻求庇护的申请。对于某些无中生有或别有用心的所谓知情人士透露，希望媒体朋友们认真甄别，切勿轻信。
Talks on a possible Ukraine ceasefire are now underway in Saudi Arabia. US and Russian officials are holding separate meetings in Riyadh, hoping to ease the three-year conflict. The US first met with Ukrainian officials, calling the talks productive. Now, Washington is meeting with Moscow to explore a temporary truce. Both sides continue to propose different ceasefire plans. Ukraine wants broader peace, but Russia only offers to halt strikes on energy sites. The Kremlin warns of tough negotiations ahead. The talks also include reviving the Black Sea grain deal, which Moscow withdrew from last year. Meanwhile, fighting rages on. Russia claims it has captured a village in Donetsk and hit multiple Ukrainian targets. Ukraine says it launched counterattacks in the same region and continues to defend its territory. Deadly drone strikes have hit both countries, causing civilian casualties. As talks continue, pressure mounts for a breakthrough.
Вже друга зустріч української та американської команд в Саудівській Аравії. Цього разу більш технічного рівня. Наші військові, наші дипломати, наші представники Міністерства енергетики. Щойно я говорив з Рустемом Умєровим, він доповів мені про зустріч, про хід перемовин. Наша команда працює абсолютно конструктивно.
We have breaking news now coming in from the ongoing situation in Turkey, where police have detained 10 journalists, including an AFP photographer, during operations across multiple cities. The arrests are linked to their coverage of violent protests in Istanbul and other areas. The protests were sparked by the jailing of Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. Rights group MLSA confirmed the detentions earlier today. Stay tuned for more updates on this ongoing situation. Moving on now. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has accused US President Donald Trump of trying to break Canada with tariffs and threats to its sovereignty, calling the country's most significant crisis in decades. Speaking after requesting the dissolution of Parliament, Carney said Canada must respond with economic strength and unity, vowing not to let Trump's actions weaken the nation. Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre launched his campaign promising to bring home the Canadian promise and insisting he will take a respectful and firm approach to Trump while ending what he calls a lost Liberal decade that has made Canada weaker. With a fresh round of US tariffs set to take effect during the election campaign, Poilievre blamed the Liberals for driving away jobs and investment while pledging to rebuild the economy. As the campaign heats up, both Carney and Poilievre have vowed to help struggling communities. But Alberta Premier Danielle Smith sparked controversy after asking Trump's team to delay tariffs until the vote. Let's take a listen to what Mark Carney had to say.
I've just requested that the Governor-General dissolve Parliament and call an election for April 28th. And she has agreed. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen.
Over to the African continent now, where the M23 armed rebel group remains in Wakele, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, despite announcing plans to withdraw. The Rwanda-backed fighters say it would reposition its forces, but vowed not to allow government troops to return. The Congolese military, monitoring the situation, has refrained from offensive action, urging local militias to do the same. Wakele is the home to around 60,000 people and was captured last Wednesday after heavy fighting. The town is strategically located near key roads leading to Goma and Bukavu, as well as valuable mineral deposits. Despite Saturday's announcement, residents confirm that M23 rebels remain in place with no signs of withdrawal. This comes after a last-minute cancellation of direct talks between Kinshasa and the M23 in Luanda. Meanwhile, fighting continues despite DR Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwanda's Paul Kagame reaffirming their commitment to an immediate ceasefire. The situation remains tense as peace efforts stall. Staying in Africa now, where in Kenya at least 6 police officers have been killed and 4 others injured in an attack on a police camp in Garissa County near the Somalia border. Authorities suspect the assault was carried out by fighters from Somalia's Al-Qaeda linked to the Al-Shabaab group. Officials say the attackers ambushed the officers early on Sunday morning. They were preparing for prayer, using heavy weapons to overrun the camp. The base housed police reservists, local volunteers who assist security forces in remote areas. Al-Shabaab frequently launches cross-border attacks in Kenya, targeting both military and civilian sites in its long-running insurgency against the Somali government. Over to Europe now. French police have arrested a young man suspected of attacking a rabbi in broad daylight. This happened after an incident that shocked the Jewish community and withdrew widespread condemnation. The attack occurred Saturday afternoon in Orleans, which is about 110 kilometers south of Paris. As Rabbi Engelberg walked home from synagogue with his 9-year-old son, according to the rabbi, the suspect approached him, asked if he was Jewish, and then began hurling insults. Engelberg said he pushed the attacker's phone away when he tried to film him, prompting the suspect to start punching and biting him. Bystanders intervened and authorities later detained the suspect, who was found without identification. Prosecutors are verifying his identity, with sources indicating he is known under 3 different names, out of which one is Moroccan and the other 2 are Palestinian. After receiving overwhelming support, Engelberg has now assured that he and his son are recovering. French President Emmanuel Macron condemned the attack, calling anti-Semitism a poison, while Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar called for zero tolerance.
Voilà, et donc là on est passé du simple graffiti à l'action très violente, l'agression très violente de notre rabbin hier, qui était au demeurant à pied avec son fils de 9 ans. Voilà, donc le sentiment c'est vraiment la colère, le ras-le-bol de cette violence gratuite vis-à-vis de notre communauté, alors que nous on ne présente qu'un visage toujours bienveillant par rapport à tout le monde et qu'on souhaite que la paix avec tout le monde.
We finish with some news from the world of sport now, where Novak Djokovic has made history at the Miami Open. The Serbian star claimed his 399th Masters 1000 win, surpassing Rafael Nadal for the all-time record. He cruised past Argentina's Camilo Ugo Carabelli in straight sets and is now chasing a record 7th Miami title. Up next, he faces Italy's Lorenzo Musetti in the 4th round. Grigor Dimitrov also fought through a tough battle. The Bulgarian, last year's runners-up, edged past Russia's Karen Karachtov in 3 sets. He now awaits a clash with Brandon Nakashima, who defeated David Goffin. Meanwhile, American Sebastian Korda stunned 9th seed Stefanos Tsitsipas in straight sets. He now awaits the winner of Joaim Munar and Gial Monfils. The action is heating up in Miami as top players push for the title. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Well, honestly, I wasn't thinking about it too much, but of course, honored to have another milestone, another record broken. There's always something on the line, you know, pretty much every time I play, and of course that motivates me as well to do well on the tournament.
Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more international news updates.